Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, at least 47 people have been killed in a plane crash in Taiwan. Reports say the flight came down in a storm after an aborted landing. Korea and Japan resumed Director-General level talks in Seoul on Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. Plus, the UN votes to launch an international inquiry into claims Israel has committed war crimes in its offensive against Hamas in Gaza, in which hundreds of Palestinian civilians have been killed in 2 weeks. Daybreak begins now. Hello, and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Thursday, July 24th, here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom, and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning: 47 people have been killed in a plane crash in Taiwan. Reports say the TransAsia Airways turboprop passenger plane was attempting to make an emergency landing in bad weather at an airport in Taiwan's Penghu County. The plane was flying from the southwestern city of Kaohsiung to the islands off the west coast and had been delayed due to bad weather brought on by Typhoon Matmo. Several local TV stations quoted witnesses saying the plane was on fire before it crashed. The Taiwanese government says 11 passengers survived the crash and have been taken to hospital. Back here in Korea, and the government has confirmed the first case of foot and mouth disease in southern central Korea in well over 3 years. Local government officials from Gyeongsang-buk-do province say a pig at a farm in the region was confirmed to have contracted the disease after displaying symptoms. Hundreds of pigs at the farm, but not all of them, will be culled on this Thursday morning as a precautionary measure. Local and central governments will also strengthen quarantine measures to prevent the spread of the disease. The latest case comes at a bad time for Korea, as the country has been looking to boost its pork exports. Korea's most wanted man, the fugitive Sewol-ho ferry owner Yoo Byung-an, whose heavily decomposed body was found in an orchard last month, had evaded arrest by hiding behind an upstairs wall of a wooden cabin with suitcases of cash at hand. Prosecutors also say they found 2 suitcases in the cabin containing more than $900,000 in cash, but prosecutors are assuming he carried some $1.9 million at the time. Local police are conducting further investigations into 3 places in Suncheon, Jeollanam-do province, where the fugitive shipping tycoon is believed to have been hiding before his death. The house is about 2.5 kilometers away from where Yoo Byung-an's badly decomposed body was found on June 12th. The National Forensic Service will reveal Yoo's final autopsy results on Friday. Now, senior officials from Seoul and Tokyo have been discussing ways to end the long-running diplomatic feud over Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. But while these talks were taking place in Seoul Wednesday, a high-ranking Japanese official in Tokyo said the Japanese government had no plans to seek new measures to resolve the issue. Hwang Sang-yi reports.
South Korea and Japan resumed talks in Seoul on Wednesday on the Japanese military's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. The monthly meeting was put on hold in June when Tokyo went back and reviewed its 1993 Kono Statement, which apologized to the so-called comfort women. The Abe administration, while upholding the landmark statement, claimed last month that Seoul was in close consultation with Tokyo when the statement was being drawn up. An official at Seoul's foreign ministry said Korea issued a formal complaint on Japan's review and increased pressure on Tokyo to compensate victims. In response, Japan explained the review was conducted as an effort to uphold the Kono Statement. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military in the early 20th century. but killing any anticipation for concrete progress between the two neighbors. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga expressed regret over Seoul's reaction. During a press briefing Wednesday, Suga said the review was conducted in an objective manner by experts. Suga added Japan has no plans for new measures to solve the comfort women issue. Penghu, Arirang News.
South Korea and China have agreed to set up a hotline between their defense chiefs to improve military cooperation between the two nations. During talks in Beijing on Wednesday, South Korean Vice Defense Minister Baek Seung-ju and China's Army Deputy Chief of Staff Guan Jung said the hotline would be up and running by the end of this year. Once the hotline is operational, the South Korean military expects to have better and faster communications with China on North Korean issues. Until now, South Korea only shared a high-level military hotline with the US. Now, less than 1 week remains before Koreans, in certain districts at least, head to the polls for the July 30th by-elections. 15 of the National Assembly's 300 seats are up for grabs. These are to replace lawmakers who resigned in the run-up to last month's local elections, were convicted of breaking electoral law or had to step down due to other irregularities. Ji Myung-gil reports.
Next week's by-election has greater significance than others in years past, and the rival parties know it. 15 parliamentary seats are up for grabs, the largest number in by-election history. But political analysts say neither the ruling Saenuri Party nor the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have managed to wow voters with their campaigns.
President Park Geun-hye's administration failed to win the support of the people as it struggled with appointing members for the new cabinet, and the main opposition party has shown political controversies when fielding candidates.
The main opposition leadership took heat this week for nominating former police officer Kwon Eun-hee to run for a seat in Gwangju's Gwansan-B constituency. She has been accused of a string of wrongdoings ranging from plagiarism to perjury.
Right now, I think the fact that the opposition party isn't doing so well, a lot of it has to do with the people becoming very sort of concerned about the Kwon Eun-hee and the legitimacy of her candidacy. I think that's going to play a big role for this election.
If the main opposition does not do as well as they hope, pundits expect that co-leader An Cheol-soo will be held responsible and that his status may weaken within the party. With no clear winner expected in next week's by-elections, rival parties are making their final pitches to win the hearts of voters. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Korea's new finance minister, Choi Kyung-hwan, has stressed the need for bold and aggressive measures to stimulate the sluggish domestic economy. He says that if resolute steps are taken right away, Korea still has time to avoid something akin to Japan's so-called lost 20 years, where wages there plunged and the country faced chronic deflation. Connie Kim reports.
First, let me recap Japan's lost 20 years. It can be summarized as 1, the asset bubble burst, 2, increase of household debt, and 3, deflation. So just how similar is the Korean economy to Japan's? Korea's housing prices had peaked in 2006, but since 2009, there has been an accelerating downward trend. The country's household debt topped $1 trillion last year, surpassing the 85% of the GDP threshold, a level that some think tanks believe is dangerous. Now, it means people will shy away from spending. Deflation had also been a talking point for some time in Korea. Korea's inflation has been kept below the lower end of the central bank's target band, and hence Minister Che's strong warning today, saying should the Korean economy stay the course, it could face a situation similar to Japan's 20 years of lost growth. But an expert that I spoke to says Korea's structural economic difference from Japan could be its saving grace. Let's take a listen.
In the case of Korea, the nation's export dependency is fairly high compared to Japan, so even on cases of domestic demand, Korea can use this to overcome the economic crisis.
Now, experts say Japan's Abenomics designed to inflate the Japanese economy has been working more or less. Now, will Taegyeonghwanomics pledging aggressive measures to boost the Korean economy work? Well, we'll have to wait and see as the government is expected to lay out its economic policy direction on Thursday. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, it's a widely established fact that Korea is a very heavily export-driven economy, and almost a quarter of the country's total exports go to one single country, China. Our Hwang Jie takes a look at different areas of the Korean economy where a heavy Chinese presence can be spotted.
Korea's Myeongdong shopping district is a beehive of activity at all hours of the day, and that activity is driven more and more by Chinese customers these days.
We have more Chinese customers than Koreans because there are a lot of tourists here. They also buy far more products than local residents because they're cheaper here than in China.
And the amount of money Chinese tourists spent in Korea on credit cards shot up over 80% last year to around 3.8 trillion won, or roughly 3.7 billion US dollars from the same period a year ago. That's almost half of what all foreigners spent in Korea.
Chinese investors have also taken a greater interest in Korea. They funneled more than $1.3 billion into Korea's securities market from December last year through May this year. That's the largest amount of any country. Experts, however, point out the risks of too much Chinese capital flowing into the country.
Chinese investors could have speculative purposes when coming into the Korean market, and if that money exits the country all at once, it could have a major negative impact on the local market.
In terms of exports, which is Korea's traditional growth engine, China's hold on the domestic economy grows even stronger. Last year, China took up almost 60% of Korea's trade surplus, while that figure stood at less than 8% in 1998. Experts add that it's important for Korean companies to continue improving their products and services so they can keep on attracting Chinese customers and their money. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, in other economic news, Koreans are not feeling that confident about the local economy looking ahead to the second half of the year. In a consumer confidence survey conducted by research firm Nielsen on 60 different countries, Korea scored a low 53. The country with the lowest score was Portugal. They recorded 48. A score above 100 shows optimism and positivity in the areas of jobs, personal finances and spending intentions. Japan had a score of 73 and China 111. The country with the highest consumer confidence level was India at 128. Now, Korea's thirst for great quality, independently produced craft beer is on the rise. Once dismissed as a fad by many, time has proven that microbrewed craft beer is not only here to stay in Korea, but it's ready to shake the dominance of the nation's big breweries. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Here is an interesting collection of craft beer. This one right here has a taste of banana, while this one has a nutty chocolate. The number of the thirsty visiting local bars for artisanal beer has surged in recent days.
Local bars like this offer a variety of beer, each brewed in its own unique way, and all leaving an unforgettable impression on the palate.
The more varieties of beer I encounter, the more I'm drawn in due to the different tastes and flavors. I've already experienced a handful, but I look forward to trying more in the coming days.
Korea has a growing interest in both craft and imported beer. The nation's imports of beer rose more than 25% in the first half of this year compared to 2013. It set up a new battlefield for the beer market.
Currently, craft beer takes up less than 1% of the beer market, and microbrewers face a long battle if they hope to compete against the large Korean companies. There's a better chance that craft beer will overtake the import beer market if current trends continue.
The growing interest in the more refined beer rose in stride with ease regulations on alcohol in the nation. The taxation on microbrewers has shrunk by 20%, and distribution was recently allowed outside of the microbreweries, which has opened up more markets like local bars and even supermarkets. But some aren't completely satisfied.
They don't go far enough. The already eased rules allow microbrewers to produce more, but we are still limited in how much business we can do.
While there is still more to be done to level the playing field for these smaller craft beer makers, recent months have shown that Koreans are willing to spend a little extra for a little something different. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Okay, it's time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Thursday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. The first 40 bodies of the victims who died in the Malaysia jetliner disaster have arrived in the Netherlands, a country deep in mourning on Wednesday. Churches around the country rang their bells for 5 minutes before the planes carrying the bodies landed. Flags were flown at half-staff for the 298 victims, nearly 200 of whom were Dutch. At Eindhoven Air Base, Prime Minister Mark Rutte, members of the Dutch royal family and hundreds of victims' relatives watched as the wooden coffins one by one were placed into a fleet of waiting hearses. A military police escort traveled with the fleet to the city of Hilversum, where forensic experts were on standby to begin the long process of identifying the remains that could take months. It was a solemn and emotional procession as rows of people came out to pay their respects and mourn of their untimely death. Meanwhile, in eastern Ukraine, pro-Russian rebels were undeterred by the global outrage and mourning as they shot down 2 Ukrainian Air Force jets. Kiev's defense ministry said the planes were hit by missiles about 30 kilometers south of the crash site of the downed Malaysian jetliner. A website of the separatist group Donetsk People's Republic reported that one of the pilots was killed and the other was being tracked by rebel fighters. This latest strike is renewing questions about Russia's involvement in rebel training and weapons support. The U.S. has said that Russia created the conditions for the downing of Flight 17. The United Nations Human Rights Council said it will investigate whether Israel's latest offensive on Gaza could amount to war crimes. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Navi Pillay in Geneva said Israel has not done enough to protect civilians, as hundreds of non-combatant Palestinians have been killed in the past 2 weeks. Citing the razing of homes and the killings of children, she said there is a strong possibility that Israel is violating international law. Pillay also condemned Hamas and other armed Palestinian groups for their indiscriminate attacks on Israel. And finally, some business news. The International Monetary Fund has cut the U.S. economic growth rate to 1.7%, down from an earlier predicted growth of 2%. It is the second lowered forecast this year. The IMF characterized this year's prospect of growth, quote, disappointing, citing the contraction at the start of the year, adding that the economy is likely to pick up next year. It also called for measures to help the poor, suggesting a minimum wage boost and tax credit expansions.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off in the LPGA with a major event taking place starting Thursday U.S. time. And that event, the LPGA International Crown, where 8 nations will face off against each other for the top prize. And for Team Korea, who's seeded second in this tournament, will face off against Australia to kick off the event. And the team will be led by Park In-bi, Yoo So-yeon, Chen Ha-yeon, and Kim In-kyung. Of course, the big matchup will be against Team USA, led by the top-ranked Stacey Lewis. Meanwhile, with the event taking place at Caves Valley Golf Course in Maryland, many consider this a preview of what to expect in the 2016 Summer Olympics. And now moving over to the South Korean national football team. With the team without a head coach yet, the KFA might have to speed up their process after the 2018 World Cup qualification schedule was released on Wednesday. The AFC releasing their qualification round schedule, considering Korea will get a bye to the second round. Their first set of matches will take place on June 11th and 16th of 2015. At the same time, the World Cup qualification round will be merged with the 2019 Asian Cup qualification, as the nations who go past the second round of qualification will automatically be placed in the 2019 Asian Cup. And now shifting gears to the South Korean national ice hockey team this time, who's still looking to qualify for the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And on Wednesday, they've got themselves a new head coach with quite an experience in the sport. And his name, Jim Peck, a 47-year-old former NHL defenseman who became the first player of Korean descent to play hockey in the NHL after being drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, he also did play 48 games with the Canadian national team and will now lead the South Korean national team. Peck signed a 4-year deal, as he will also work as the executive director of the men's team. And now finishing things off with some Wednesday night KBO action, we had the Tucson Bears and the SK Wyverns rain out for the second straight night, but the NC Dinos and the Hanwha Eagles winning streak, beating them 8-4, with the Samsung Lions beating the Lotte Giants in a slugfest 15-12. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Kia Tigers take on the LG Twins. And going into the game here right from the get-go, bottom of the first inning, Najuan with the man on deep to center field, gone a 2-run shot, and Kia has a early 2-0 lead. Now, second inning of the game, more from Kia. This time, Kim Joo-chan with an RBI single to center field, and it's now 3-0 Kia. But check this out, fourth inning, bases loaded for Chae Kyung-char, and there it goes to deep left field, a grand slam, and LG has the lead 4-3. But not done yet. Chung Sung-hoon this time, an RBI double to right center field, makes it 5-3. And here we go, next play, Brad Snyder with 2-man on, gone, a 3-run shot, and it's 8-3. But we're not done. Lee Byung-gil this time, back, gone, solo shot to center field, capping a 9-run fourth inning. And after all that, the LG Twins would hang on to win this game 11-8, your final score. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-yeon with your weather update. Well, rain in the central region picked up again overnight, and monsoonal front is dropping showers to regions up north, but it should thin out and gradually stop as we head into the midday. And it seems like southern regions will also receive sporadic showers sometime in the afternoon. So people down south will not get much relief from the heat today, though temperatures should be slightly lower than yesterday, while upper regions should have temperatures similar to a tad higher than yesterday, hovering below 30 degrees Celsius. With that, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul is starting out at 24, then the high will rise to 28, while Daegu will climb to 34, and Gwangju and Busan will have a daily highs of 29 and 30 respectively. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju Island, Daejeon and Dokdo should all see highs of 30, while Mount Keungang tops out at 22. Well, that's all I have for you at this hour. Drive carefully in the rain today and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in 30 minutes' time, and we'll be back here on Arirang TV with news throughout the day. And I'll be back at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.